The wildfire struck without mercy, turning the quiet valley into a violent sea of flames as Lila, heart jolted awake to the smell of burning pine and the crackle of heat against her cabin walls. With smoke already seeping inside, she grabbed only a small bag and lifted her injured dog, Bandit, into her arms before fleeing into the night, her heart pounding helplessly as the inferno swallowed every memory, every hope, every piece of the life she'd struggled to build. The air grew hotter with every step, the smoke thicker, her breaths shallow and painful as she stumbled along the dirt path that had always felt safe but now looked like a glowing corridor of destruction. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs, and Bandit whimpered in pain, sending a fresh wave of panic through her. When her knees finally buckled, she fell to the ground, convinced she had reached the end, that she and Bandit would become nothing more than another forgotten tragedy of the fire. But through the roar of the flames came the thunder of hooves, steady and determined, and a dark silhouette appeared through the haze, a towering horse and a broad-shouldered cowboy guiding it straight toward her. Before she could react, he was at her side, lifting her effortlessly into his arms with a calm authority that cut through her terror. She felt the strength in his grip, heard the steady reassurance in his voice as he murmured, "You're safe now. I've got you." She didn't know him yet, didn't know he was Rhett Carver, the powerful rancher who owned more land than anyone in the territory, but in that moment as he carried her away from the flames and into the cool darkness beyond them, she clung to him with a desperate belief that he was her only chance at survival. By morning, Lila awoke to the unfamiliar scent of cedar and fresh linen, her body sore but her mind slowly realizing she was alive and safe. Bandit lay at her feet, wagging his tail weakly but uninjured thanks to Rhett's care, and for the first time since the fire, she allowed herself a deep, shaky breath. When she stepped from the guest room into the sunlight streaming through the wide windows, she was stunned by the size and warmth of the ranch house. High beams, polished wood floors, and walls adorned with landscapes of open fields and mountains that somehow made the world feel larger and more alive than she had imagined. Hesitant and out of place, she followed the smell of coffee and found Rhett in the kitchen, his dark hair slightly tousled, hands steady as he poured 2 mugs. His voice, calm and deep, greeted her with a simple "Mornin'," and it carried a reassurance she hadn't expected from a man of such power and reputation. Though she wanted to apologize for intruding, for being a burden, he waved it away without offense. "You're welcome here as long as you need," he said, sliding a plate toward her. It was more than hospitality, it was a promise. She watched him move through the house with authority tempered by care, noticing the ranch hand's easy respect for him and the gentle way he interacted with both people and animals. Lila realized that this was a man used to commanding respect and handling challenges that dwarfed her own. Yet he treated her, an uninvited guest who had lost everything, with patience, kindness, and quiet strength. In that moment, sitting at the table with Bandit curled beside her chair, she understood that shelter was more than a roof over her head. It was the steady presence of someone willing to protect and care for her. And as she sipped the warm coffee Rhett had prepared, a fragile sense of hope began to take root, promising that life could still offer safety, comfort, and perhaps even trust. Over the following days, Lila settled into a rhythm she hadn't known in years, one defined by safety, quiet moments, and the steady presence of Rhett Carver. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the rolling pastures, and the simple routine of chores on the ranch slowly drew her into the rhythm of his world. Rhett's patience and quiet strength became a comfort she didn't realize she was craving. He guided her gently through tasks, explained the nuances of ranch life, and always seemed to notice the small details. The way she hesitated with a horse, the careful way she tended to Bandit, without ever making her feel inept. Their interactions, though, carried a current neither could ignore. A brush of fingers as he handed her a tool, a glance that lingered just a second too long, the warm tone of his voice when he spoke directly to her. At night they shared dinners with the ranch hands, but it was the moments after, the quiet walks to the creek, the laughter shared while checking on the animals, that drew them closer, building trust and something far more fragile and intoxicating: attraction. Lila found herself thinking about him even when apart, noticing the way his presence steadied her nerves and warmed her chest in a way she hadn't expected. Rhett, for his part, was clearly captivated by her courage and resilience, watching her navigate the ranch with admiration, smiling at the little quirks that made her uniquely her. Though neither voiced the growing connection, it pulsed between them in each touch, each shared smile, each silence that felt too intimate to be casual. By the end of each day, Lila realized that the spark between them was no longer accidental, it was growing steadily, a warm ember amid the ashes of her past, promising that something new, something tender and powerful, was beginning to take root in their lives. Just as Lila began to feel a fragile sense of security, the shadows of her past crept back into her life, threatening to undo the peace she had found with Rhett. A letter arrived at the ranch gate, its familiar handwriting instantly sending a shiver down her spine. It was from Mason, her former boyfriend, the man who had tried to control her life and had long believed the land she called home should have been his. The message was clear. He intended to contest her ownership and drag her into a battle she could not afford to fight, using threats and legal maneuvering to intimidate her. Layla's chest tightened as she hid the letter, fearing that revealing it to Rhett would burden him with the mess of her past. Yet the moment he noticed her distant expression, he pressed gently, concern etched in every line of his face. She tried to deflect, but Rhett, accustomed to reading people and situations alike, refused to be brushed off. At the same time, Rhett's own challenges surfaced. Ranch rivals were testing his influence, aiming to undermine the authority he wielded across the territory. Though he tried to shield Lila from his troubles, she sensed the tension in his movements, the long hours on horseback, the grim expression he wore even in the quiet moments. Between the unspoken threats from her past and the pressures of his present responsibilities, the space between them became fragile, charged with emotion neither fully understood. Every glance, every touch carried warmth and growing affection, but also the weight of unsaid fears. Lila worried she might lose the safety she had found. Rhett feared losing someone he hadn't yet openly claimed. And while neither knew how to bridge the growing gap, both understood, deep down, that the past and the present were colliding in a way that would soon test the strength of the connection quietly blossoming between them. You said. Tension finally erupted between Lila and Rhett when the weight of their unspoken fears and external threats collided, creating a rift neither expected but both felt keenly. Mason, relentless and manipulative, showed up at the edge of Rhett's property, demanding that Lila meet him to discuss her claim to the land, his presence a sharp reminder of the life she had tried to escape. At the same time, Rhett's rival, Calvin Briggs, stirred trouble along the county lines, testing the limits of Rhett's authority and creating a pressure that kept him constantly on edge. Lila, fearing she might endanger Rhett or become a source of distraction, withdrew, determined to handle her past alone, her pride clashing with the fragile trust they had been building. Rhett, sensing her distance but not knowing the full cause, misinterpreted her withdrawal as regret, as if she wished she hadn't come to his ranch, and he pulled back to protect his own heart from disappointment. Their once gentle interactions, brushes of hands, shared smiles, quiet conversations, were replaced with cautious distance, and every glance between them carried a tension of words unsaid. Lila wrestled with guilt and longing, yearning to reach out yet afraid of being a burden, while Rhett struggled with a growing ache he couldn't name, frustrated by his own inability to bridge the emotional gap without knowing the truth. Even the familiar comfort of the ranch, the morning sun over the pastures, Bandit at her side, the rhythm of chores felt hollow without their closeness. That distance, though silent, was deafening, and both knew that unless the misunderstandings were addressed, the fragile connection they had fought so hard to cultivate could be lost entirely. In the quiet moments of the evening, as Lila sat alone by the creek or Rhett rode along the fence line, both felt the same undeniable pull and invisible tether between them, waiting for courage, honesty, and trust to finally reconnect them. The fragile barrier between Lila and Rhett shattered when danger forced them together in a moment neither could ignore. A new wildfire, smaller but fast-moving, ignited near the remnants of Lila's old property, and she, driven by a mix of fear, pride, and a lingering attachment, ran toward it alone, determined to see the damage for herself. Rhett, sensing her absence and fearing for her safety, didn't hesitate. He mounted his horse and raced after her through smoke and heat, the landscape tense and dangerous beneath their hooves. When he found her surrounded by encroaching flames, panic flaring in her eyes, he leapt from the horse, pulling her into his arms with the same calm authority that had first saved her life. The fire roared around them, but his presence created a bubble of safety, and for the first time in days, Lila felt the full weight of his care and commitment. In the midst of the chaos, Rhett's voice cut through the crackling heat. "I told you, you're safe with me. I won't let anything happen to you." The sincerity and strength behind those words shattered her remaining doubts, making her realize she had never needed protection more or more urgently than now. As they escaped to safety, the adrenaline and fear melted into raw honesty, and Rhett finally admitted what had been building quietly between them. That he could not bear the thought of losing her, that he wanted her in his life fully, not just as a guest on his ranch, but as someone he cared for deeply. Layla, shaken but safe, felt her own heart respond, the lingering tension and fear of abandonment giving way to trust, longing, and the undeniable pull of love. By the time they reached the open pastures beyond the fire, the ember of attraction that had grown between them now burned brightly with recognition. They were no longer two solitary souls coexisting under the same roof. They were bound by courage, care, and the promise of something deeper, ready to face whatever came next together. "You said." In the calm after the second fire, Lila and Rhett finally confronted the emotions they had been skirting, each realizing that fear and pride could no longer stand in the way of what was growing between them. Sitting together on the porch under the deepening glow of a sunset, Lila spoke first, her voice trembling as she confessed the anxiety and loneliness she had carried since the first fire, the fear of trusting someone again, and the guilt of feeling like a burden to him. Rhett listened quietly, his eyes soft but unwavering, and when she finished, he placed a hand over hers with a certainty that steadied her trembling heart. He admitted his own fears of losing her, of letting someone he cared about slip away, and of opening his heart only to face heartbreak. But he also confessed the truth he had long withheld, that from the moment he found her in the flames he had been captivated by her courage, resilience, and gentle spirit, and that he could no longer imagine his life without her. In the warmth of that shared vulnerability, walls they had both built over years began to crumble, leaving only honesty, trust, and longing in their place. The tension that had lingered between them for days, the hesitation in touches, the glances that spoke more than words, was finally acknowledged, and with it came the freedom to express the connection that had been quietly binding them. Their first kiss came slowly, tenderly, a sealing of promises neither had spoken aloud, but both had felt from the first day he saved her. In that moment, Lila realized that the safety she had found with Rhett extended far beyond shelter or protection. It encompassed her heart, her trust, and the beginning of a love that could withstand fear, fire, and the uncertainties of the world outside the ranch gates. The future, once uncertain and frightening, now felt possible and radiant with him by her side. With the fires behind them and their hearts laid bare, Lila and Rhett began building a life together. A future shaped not by loss but by the love and trust that had grown from the ashes. Lila helped rebuild the land she had once called home, planting gardens, tending animals, and restoring the fields that had been scorched. But now she did it alongside Rhett, hand in hand, sharing laughter, sweat, and quiet victories. Rhett, who had always been a man of action and authority, found a new purpose in her presence, protecting not just his land, but the woman who had ignited his heart. Slowly, the ranch transformed from a vast, solitary expanse into a home filled with warmth, life, and the rhythm of two people creating something together. Bandit bounded freely across pastures, no longer a reminder of past fears, but a symbol of new beginnings. And the once intimidating ranch hands now watched with fond smiles as the pair worked side by side, their bond evident in every shared glance and gentle touch. Lila finally accepted a home with Rhett, not out of necessity but out of choice and love, and in turn, Rhett welcomed her fully into his world. No longer the lone cowboy who controlled the range, but a man who had found the partner his life had been waiting for. On evenings when the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in gold and pink, they would stand together on the porch, arms around each other, watching the land stretch endlessly before them. In those quiet moments, Lila realized that the losses she had endured, the fire, the fear, the past had led her to something far greater than she could have imagined. Safety, belonging, and a love that could endure anything. And as the first stars appeared overhead, they shared a quiet, contented smile, knowing that together they had not just survived, they had truly begun. "You said,"